The alien girl's lick wasn't random, it was a sacred vow asterisk. The sky above the forest burned orange as the escape pod crashed through the clouds like a falling star. Jace was sitting on a broken rock wall, chewing a dry protein bar, when the sound made him jump to his feet. He grabbed his scanner and sprinted through the trees. Heart pounding fast, whatever had fallen wasn't small, and it had landed just beyond the ridge. The crash site was smoking and hot. Metal panels twisted and burning. Inside the wreck, something moved. Jace pulled his knife and approached slowly. That's when he saw her. She looked young, alien, but young. Her skin was pale violet. Glowing slightly under the smoke, her eyes were large and silver, full of fear, pain, and confusion. She tried to crawl away, but collapsed with a weak groan. One leg was badly burned, and her arms shook like she had no strength left. "It's okay," Jace said softly, kneeling down and showing both hands. "I'm not going to hurt you, of course." She didn't understand his words, but she stopped, moving, and stared at him. Breathing hard, he carefully picked her up and carried her away from the fire. She was light, too light, like her bones were hollow, back at his camp. He placed her on a blanket and covered her with his jacket. She didn't resist, just kept staring at him. Blinking slowly, he gave her water, and she drank it fast, like she hadn't had any in days. He crushed a pill into warm soup and held the spoon to her lips. She ate it without complaint. For a while, they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. The forest was quiet, except for the wind. Jace didn't know what kind of alien she was, or what language she spoke. But something about her, the way she watched him, didn't feel hostile. As he leaned closer to check her bandages, she suddenly reached up and licked his face. It was slow and strange. From his jaw to his cheek, the touch was warm and soft, her tongue leaving behind a faint glow. Jace froze, wide-eyed. "Whoa, what was that for?" he asked, wiping his face with his sleeve. She said nothing, just looked at him like he had become someone else. There was no smile, no laugh, only a calm, serious stare. He thought it was some weird alien greeting, maybe a sign of thanks. He laughed awkwardly, trying to lighten the moment. "Well, I guess I'm part of your tribe now, huh?" But her expression didn't change. Instead, she slowly touched his face again. Right where she had licked, the glow from her tongue mark was now gently pulsing. Like a heartbeat, Jace felt a strange warmth in his skin, like electricity moving under the surface. Then she said something in her language, a whisper, almost a breath, Shinari. Telek Jace didn't understand, but it sent a chill down his spine. Her eyes fluttered. And then she passed out from exhaustion. He laid her down and covered her again, staring at the glowing mark on his cheek. That night he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the heat on his skin. And her whisper echoed in his mind. He got up to check on her, but she was breathing normally, fast asleep. Jace looked at his reflection in a pot of water. The mark was still there. Glowing dim blue. "Great," he muttered. "Now I'm glowing." Just before dawn, the forest suddenly shifted. All the birds and small creatures went silent. Jace stood and grabbed his scanner. Something was approaching, not one thing, but many. And fast. He turned to wake the alien girl. But she was already sitting up, alert, eyes wide. She pointed toward the trees and spoke urgently in her language. He didn't understand her words, but her fear was clear. They were in danger. She tried to stand, but cried out in pain, her legs still weak. Jace helped her up, throwing her arm over his shoulder. "Come on," he whispered. "Whoever they are, they're not getting you together." They limped into the trees, the glow on his face brighter now, behind them. Dark shapes moved through the smoke, silent and fast. But Jace didn't look back. He had no idea what the lick really meant. No idea what he had agreed to. but something deep inside him already knew this was only the beginning. The night was colder than usual, but Jace didn't feel it. Not with the alien girl leaning on him and that strange glowing mark still pulsing on his cheek. They moved through the dark trees as fast as her injured leg would allow. He had no idea where they were going, but anywhere away from those shadows was good enough. Behind them, the sound of movement grew louder. Quiet footsteps, mechanical beeps, and something like sniffing. Whoever or whatever was hunting them was getting close. Jace tightened his grip around her waist, whispering just a bit further, "Come on." She didn't reply, but she didn't stop either. Her hand clung tightly to his shirt, her silver. Eyes sharp with fear, they found a low cave hidden by thick roots and ducked inside. Jace helped her sit down and placed stones at the mouth of the cave to block the view from outside. The moment they stopped, she leaned forward and touched the glowing spot on his cheek again. It pulsed brighter under her fingers, as if it responded to her alone. "What is this thing?" he asked quietly. She stared into his eyes and spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. "Chosen one," she said, her voice soft but sure. Jace blinked, confused. Chosen for what? She looked down at her own hands, then pointed to the mark, then back to her chest. She didn't have the full words yet, but the message was clear enough. Whatever she did to him, that strange face lick had connected them somehow. He wasn't just some helpful stranger anymore. He was now part of something much bigger and definitely more dangerous. He leaned back against the cold stone wall, trying to understand. The wound on his arm, from when he was shot earlier, was completely healed. No pain, no scar, not even a bruise. That wasn't normal. The glow had spread slightly along his neck. Tiny lines like veins lit up under the skin. It was as if something inside him was changing, and he didn't know how to stop it. The girl was watching him carefully, her breathing slow and steady. Now she seemed calm, but her eyes never left the cave entrance. Jace lowered his voice. "Who are they? The ones chasing us?" She paused, then drew a symbol in the dirt with her finger, 3 lines crossing each other like blades. "Hunters." She whispered. "Why?" he asked. Already fearing the answer, she hesitated, then tapped his cheek again. "Because you are mine." The words made his stomach twist, not because of fear, but because of what might come next. He had no idea what rules he had broken by helping her, but clearly, her people or enemies believed something dangerous had happened. He was marked now, and that mark made him a target. Suddenly, something passed in front of the cave, a shadow, slow and deliberate. Jace held his breath and reached for the small weapon hidden in his boot. The alien girl didn't move, but her fingers were glowing faint blue now. Her body tensed like a predator about to strike. A drone floated silently outside, scanning the area with a green light. It paused near the rocks blocking the entrance, its sensor humming softly. Jace tightened his grip on the handle, his heartbeat pounding like thunder in his ears. The girl raised one hand, palm glowing brighter. And then the drone turned and drifted away, as if it didn't see them at all. Jace exhaled slowly, shoulders sinking. "What did you do?" he whispered, eyes wide. The girl looked tired now, but proud. "Shield. Bondhide," she explained, touching both their chests. The glow between them seemed to react, like a silent agreement passing through the air. He didn't know what was happening to him, but he was starting to feel things, a strange connection. Like he could sense her thoughts, not words, but emotions, fear, pain, trust, and something else too. Something warmer. Was this what she meant by chosen? Was this bond more than survival? Before he could ask anything more, she closed her eyes and leaned against his shoulder. For the first time since the crash, she looked safe. Jace stayed still, letting her rest, watching the mark on his face glow gently in the darkness. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. The hunters would be back, stronger and smarter. But now he wasn't just running for his own life. He was bound to her by a choice she made, and a future he couldn't yet see. And deep down, something told him he would never be the same again. The alien girl moved before he did. 1 second. Jace was walking behind her through the crystal-lit valley. And the next, she had thrown him to the ground. A spear of light shot through the air where his chest had just been. It struck the tree behind them and exploded into glowing dust. He lay there, stunned, breath frozen. She crouched above him like a shield, her glowing fingers stretched wide, her eyes sharp and cold. The attacker didn't reveal themselves, but the sound of something moving fast across the rocks echoed all around them. The girl growled low in her throat, like a warning. Jace had never heard her make that sound before. He tried to speak, but her hand slammed gently over his mouth. She didn't say a word, just waited. The silence stretched too long. Then, from the ridge above, a figure appeared, tall, armored, and holding a weapon shaped like a spine. It wasn't like the others. This one wore the mark she drew in the dirt before the three-blade symbol. The figure didn't speak. Instead, it pointed straight at Jace, then pointed at the girl, then made the motion of a hand slicing through rope. Jace didn't need words to understand the message. They wanted the bond broken. They wanted him gone. The girl stood slowly, her body tense. She stepped forward with one hand raised, her palm glowing again. The figure said nothing. Then, suddenly, it vanished like smoke in the air. Jace sat up quickly. What the hell was that? He whispered. The girl turned, stared into his eyes, and said just one word. Test. Later that night, Jace sat by a small fire she had made with glowing blue bark. He watched her as she gently cleaned his shoulder, where a sharp branch had scraped him earlier. Her touch was careful, almost too careful. He couldn't understand it. She had saved his life twice now, maybe 3 times. But why? He tried again. Why do you keep helping me? She tilted her head, then looked up at the sky. She whispered something in her language, soft and melodic. Then she placed her hand on her own chest. Heart, she said, then touched his. Yours. Jace didn't know what to say. His chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from confusion. Then something else too. The bond wasn't just glowing marks and protection. It was something emotional, something deep. And it was growing stronger with every hour they spent together. The next day, they reached an old ruin deep in the jungle. Massive stones covered in vines and glowing letters stood tall like forgotten giants. The girl stopped at the gate and looked nervous. She took Jace's hand without asking. It was the first time she'd done that. Together, they stepped through the arch. Inside, a soft humming filled the air. Jace felt the mark on his cheek heat up again. The glowing letters on the walls started to respond. They pulsed, changed, and slowly rearranged into something he could read. The words said, "Only the chosen shall open the past." The girl turned to him and gave a slight nod. She walked to a small pedestal and placed both hands on it. Then she looked back at him, waiting. Jace hesitated, then placed his hands over hers. The ground shook, light burst from the stones, and the ruin began to open beneath them. A staircase spiraled downward into darkness. They descended slowly, the light of their marks guiding the way. The walls below were filled with paintings, images of her people, and among them, humans, not just any humans, but ones with glowing cheeks and arms, just like him. Chosen ones, protectors, maybe even lovers. He didn't understand it all, but one thing became clear. This wasn't the first time a bond like theirs had formed. They reached the end of the stairs. A room opened up before them, filled with crystals and a giant statue of her kind holding hands with a human. The girl walked forward and stood before it silently. Jace followed and looked up. He whispered, "This is what they fear, isn't it?" She nodded once, Slowly, outside, the wind howled louder. Shadows gathered near the ruins gate. Enemies were coming again, this time more prepared. But Jace didn't feel afraid anymore. He turned to her, eyes steady. "I'm not leaving you." Her eyes softened, and she stepped forward. Then, for the first time since the beginning, she licked his face again, but this time something changed. His whole body lit up, his heart pounded like thunder, and the statue behind them began to glow. The bond was complete now, and its true power was about to awaken. It began with a sound no human ears should hear, like a song made of stone and thunder, rising from deep beneath the earth. Jace covered his ears, but the alien girl did not. She stood calmly, her eyes closed, as if she was listening to something beautiful. The glowing statue behind them pulsed. With waves of light, each wave passed through their bodies like a heartbeat shared between them. Jace staggered backward, breathing hard. The mark on his face was burning not with pain, but with energy. It spread across his skin like roots under glass, glowing softly. He looked down at his hands and saw the same blue light pulsing under his veins. "What is this place?" he whispered. But no answer came. The girl opened her eyes slowly, stepped forward, and touched the base of the statue. A stone door slid open behind it, revealing a narrow tunnel filled with blue mist. She looked at Jace and said only one word: "Memory." Jace followed, his steps unsure, his heart pounding louder than ever. The tunnel felt like it had been untouched for centuries. Ancient murals covered the walls, images of her kind standing beside humans. But these humans wore armor made of light, their bodies covered in the same glowing marks he now had. He stopped in front of one image. It showed a human man falling in battle, his alien partner screaming above him. Her face looked almost like the girl beside him. Maybe it was her ancestor. Maybe it was something more. They reached the end of the tunnel, where a crystal pool shimmered in the ground. The girl kneeled beside it and placed both hands into the water. The liquid glowed and lifted like smoke, shaping into visions. Jace watched with wide eyes as the past unfolded before him. He saw humans arriving on her planet, long ago, explorers, scientists, protectors. Some were kind, some cruel, but one human, marked by a bond like his, fought beside the alien people. He and his partner, the girl in the vision, united the tribes and brought peace to a broken world. They called him the Bonded Flame. But when he died, her people shattered. They outlawed the bond, buried its history, and declared it a danger. Jace stepped back, breath caught in his throat. He turned to the girl. "You weren't supposed to choose me, were you?" She lowered her eyes, shame and sorrow in her silence. Then she nodded. Once, he understood now that lick wasn't a joke, wasn't affectionate, was a vow. She had restarted something forbidden, and now the old enemies had returned to stop it again. Outside the ruin, thunder cracked without a storm. The girl stiffened, her head turning sharply. "They found us," she whispered. Jace looked at the glowing pool once more, then followed her as they rushed back up the spiral path. When they reached the entrance, black-armored figures waited. At least 6 weapons drawn, eyes hidden behind smooth masks. The leader stepped forward and raised a hand nod in peace. "But command," returned the girl. A voice echoed through a device. "The bond must end." Jace stepped in front of her, heart racing. He didn't have a weapon, didn't have training, but he had the bond, and he had her. She reached out, touching his hand gently. Her mark lit up like fire, connecting to his. A beam of blue light burst between them, forming a shield. The attackers opened fire. Energy bolts struck the barrier but didn't break it. The girl raised her hand, and the earth trembled. Vines shot up from the ground, wrapping around the enemies like ropes. She was fighting with power older than anyone here remembered. And she wasn't afraid, not with him beside her. One of the attackers broke free and lunged toward Jace. In a flash, the girl jumped between them and struck with a blast of light from her palm. The figure was thrown into the air and vanished into the jungle. Jace stared at her, breathless. She turned to him slowly, her chest rising and falling. "You changed me," he whispered. She nodded once, then leaned forward and gave him another soft, slow lick on the cheek. This time, Jace didn't flinch. This time, he felt his chest swell with something strange and powerful. Something that wasn't just his own. The attackers fled into the night. The girl stepped close and whispered one word in his ear, "Awaken," and the light inside him burst like a star. The first thing he noticed was the silence. Not the usual kind, not peaceful. This silence pressed against his skin like cold hands. The wind had stopped, the trees didn't move. Even the glowing bugs in the air hovered motionless. Jay stood at the edge of the clearing, heart pounding. Behind him, the alien girl held his hand tighter than before. The glow on his face hadn't faded since she whispered the word, "Awaken." In fact, it was spreading. Faint lines ran down his neck, across his chest, pulsing like a second heartbeat. He didn't feel sick or hurt. He felt more aware, more alive, like the world had opened another layer that only he could see. He turned to her. "What's happening to me?" She stepped closer, eyes full of light. She placed her hand over his chest again and whispered a word he didn't know. Then she said softly, "The bond accepts you." He looked down at his glowing veins. "Accepts me for what?" She didn't answer. She only turned and walked deeper into the jungle. Pulling him gently, he followed. Because now it felt like if he let go, he'd lose something. More than just her. They walked for hours, through tall roots and glowing streams, until they reached a massive rock wall shaped like a closed door. She raised her hand, and the mark on her palm glowed bright. Jace's cheek began to burn in response. The door split open with a quiet rumble, revealing a chamber of light. Inside, the walls were covered in mirrors, but they didn't show his reflection. They showed versions of him. In one, he wore armor made of crystal and flame. In another, he held her hand while fire rained from the sky. In one mirror, he was kneeling before her with his head bowed. Each image showed a different fate. He reached out to touch one, but her hand stopped him. "No, choose yet," she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, as if afraid he might choose the wrong path too early. She led him to the center of the room. A platform rose beneath their feet, lifting them slowly. "Oh." Jace held his breath as the mirrors vanished below. Above them, a new space opened to quiet. Temple of floating stones and glowing rings. In the center hovered a massive orb. Turning slowly, inside it swirled stars, memories, and something that looked like time itself. "This shows all bonds," she whispered. "All stories." Jace stared at it, eyes wide. "Is this why they fear us?" She nodded. "The bond is future." Then the orb pulsed, and a vision appeared. It showed Earth, broken, burning, under siege. Ships filled the sky, and people screamed. Then it showed her people, chained, controlled, forced to serve. Then it showed something else, him and her, standing between both worlds, protecting, choosing, burning with power. Jace stumbled back, overwhelmed. "Is this real?" The girl touched his arm gently. "Could be," she whispered. "Only if we stay." He turned away, heart racing. He had only come here to survive. He didn't ask for a bond, or visions, or prophecy. But now, everything had changed, suddenly. A sharp sound echoed from below. A scream, followed by firelight. They looked down from the edge of the platform. Enemy soldiers had entered the chamber below. The same black-armored ones from before, but more of them. One of them looked up, his helmet glowing red. He raised a strange weapon and shouted, "Sever the bond now, or he dies with her." Jace stepped forward without thinking. "No," he shouted back, voice stronger than he expected. "You don't get to decide that." The enemy fired. Jace raised his hand purely by instinct. A shield of light erupted in front of them, stronger than the one before. It burned with the same pattern as her palm, and the same glow as his veins. The girl looked at him in awe. "You." Awakened, he didn't know how he did it, but he knew one thing now. The bond wasn't just emotional light, was power, shared power, and the more they trusted each other, stronger it became. The soldiers tried to rush the chamber, but this time, Jace didn't hide behind her. He stood beside her, their hands glowing as one. Together, they stepped forward. Not as prey, but as something new, something ancient returning. And in that moment, even the enemies hesitated. Because they too saw the truth. The bond had awakened, and its meaning was far more dangerous than they had feared. The sky tore open like paper, not with thunder, not with lightning, but with silence too loud to bear. Jace looked up and saw it, a ship the size of a mountain descending slowly, silently. Its surface shimmered like black ice, covered in glowing red lines. He didn't need anyone to tell him who it belonged to. They had come, the ones who had been, chasing her since the beginning, the ones who called her property. Threat and mistake all at once. The alien girl stood at the cliff's edge, staring at the ship without blinking. Her hands were at her sides, fingers curled tightly. Jace walked up behind her, the bond between them pulsing harder now, faster. He could feel her thoughts, not words, not images, but raw emotion, pain, fear, anger, and something else, sorrow. "Is that them?" he asked. Already knowing the answer, she nodded once. Slowly, "They come." "To break," she whispered. "Break what?" She turned and looked him in the eyes. "Us." Within minutes, the sky filled with smaller ships, each one shaped like a blade. They landed in rows, forming a wall of black around the mountain base. Out of them came soldiers in armor like shadows. No faces, no voices, just movement sharp, organized, deadly. Jace stood protectively in front of the girl. Even though he had no weapon, he didn't need one. The bond inside him felt like fire now, burning in his chest and flowing into his arms. He didn't know what to do with it, but it was there, waiting, ready. One of the soldiers stepped forward. Holding a long staff glowing red at the tip, he tapped the ground 3 times. Then spoke in a strange, machine-like voice. "She belongs to the Sovereign Core. The bond is illegal. Surrender her, and you may live." The girl stepped forward beside Jace. Shoulders straight. "No," she said. "She is mine." Jace replied, surprising even himself. The soldier paused, then raised the staff high. "Then you will both die." The air cracked, blades flew through the sky, spinning and sparking. Jace raised his hands without thinking. A shield burst from his palms, circular, blue, alive. The blades hit and bounced off like rubber, crashing into the trees. Gasps echoed across the battlefield, not from humans, not from her people, but from the soldiers themselves. Jace stepped forward, heart pounding like a drum. "You're scared?" he said quietly. "You're scared because you know what this bond really is?" The staff-wielding leader spoke again. "The bond awakens memory. It brings back the old war. We ended it once, we will end it again behind them." More troops began surrounding the ruins, cutting off every path. The girl whispered something in her own tongue, something like a prayer or a spell. Then she grabbed Jace's hand and pressed her forehead to his. The bond surged, brighter than ever. Suddenly, the ruins behind them began to rise. Stone pillars lifted from the earth, forming rings around them. Each one hummed with power. Ancient and forgotten, symbols lit up in the air, symbols Jace had never seen, but somehow understood. One word repeated over and over: unity. The soldiers hesitated again. The ground beneath their boots trembled slightly. Then, with a roar of vengeance, the main ship above began to descend faster. Its underbelly opened like a giant mouth, revealing a massive red cannon. Jace knew what it was. He didn't need to guess. They weren't here to arrest anyone anymore. They were here to wipe everything clean. "Go," he said, turning to her. "Run," but she didn't move. Instead, she licked his cheek again. Slowly, carefully, then she said, "Together." The bond pulsed once more, but this time it exploded. The light wrapped around both of them, lifting them off the ground slightly. The pillars around them cracked open, revealing glowing stones, shaped like hearts. The ancient power had returned because of them. The cannon fired, a red beam shot from the sky. Tearing through clouds, it hit the light around them and stopped. Not bounced, not scattered, just stopped. Like the bond had created a wall against destruction itself. The soldiers stared in disbelief, their weapons lowering slowly. Then the ground split beneath their feet, and the light shot upward, breaking the cannon into dust. When it was over, Jace opened his eyes slowly. The soldiers were gone. The ship was retreating, and the alien girl was still holding his hand. She smiled at him with tears in her eyes. "Now they know," she said softly. "The bond is not weakness. It is beginning." The world was quiet again. It's not because the danger was gone, because it had seen what could not be unseen. The red skies faded back to blue, and the black ships that had come with rage now floated away with silence. Jace stood at the edge of the cliff, the same place it all started. Below him, the jungle was scarred, but still breathing, still alive. Beside him, the alien girl stood barefoot, her silver hair drifting in the breeze. She said nothing, but he could feel her heart through the bond between them. It pulsed gently, like it was resting after a storm. His armor was gone now, melted back into his skin, but the glow on his cheek still remained. Everything had changed. They had survived, together. But now came the harder question. What came next? Was this the end of a war, the start of something bigger? She sat down on a stone near the edge, hugging her knees close. Jace watched her for a while before sitting beside her. "You knew it might kill us," he said. Voice low, she nodded. "But you didn't run." She shook her head. "I couldn't," she whispered. "I chose you." He looked out across the land, at the villages hidden under green leaves, the distant rivers, the broken ruins, glowing softly. "You think they'll come back?" he asked. She looked at him, her eyes gentle now. "They always come back," she said, "but not the same way." Jace ran a hand through his hair, thinking about everything, the bond, the power, the memories it had given him of places he never saw, of stars he never touched. "I feel like someone else is living in me," he admitted. The girl leaned against his shoulder slowly. "That someone is still you," she said. "Just more." There was a silence between them, not awkward, just deep. He looked down at his hand, still marked faintly by the glow of her energy. "Do you regret it?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly. "Regret licking your face?" she asked with a small smile. He laughed, the sound surprising even himself. "No," he said. "I think that was the strangest beginning to something real I've ever known." She turned to him fully, her expression soft but serious. "In my culture," she said, "we do not kiss, we do not give rings. We do not write promises, we lick. It's how we give part of ourselves to another. It is bond, it is vow, it is phone, it is." She hesitated. "It is love." Jace felt his heart pound in his chest. Not from fear this time, but from something warmer, something he hadn't let himself feel until now. He leaned forward slightly, unsure. She moved first, a soft lick, too. His cheek, slow and full of emotion. Then she whispered, "One last time. I give you everything." The glow between them flared once more, not as a weapon, but as warmth. The earth around them shimmered. The jungle leaves danced, and far above, a single beam of light shot up through the sky. A signal not of war, but of something reborn. They didn't know what would come tomorrow. Maybe more soldiers, maybe more threats. Maybe a galaxy full of questions. But Jace didn't care. Not now, not while holding her hand, feeling her head. Resting against him, he smiled, eyes closing slowly. "You know," he said gently. "If anyone back home asks how this started, I'll have to say, an alien girl licked my face." She smiled too. "Sleepy now, then you licked my soul," she whispered. "And I never got it back," as the sun set beyond the alien trees. The two of them sat in silence. No more running, no more hiding. Just a human and an alien girl, bonded not by fate, not by power, but by choice, by a strange, unforgettable beginning, and a final lick that meant everything.